पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर्द्यौः शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तरदिशा शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्वः शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha. Sarve bhadrani pashyantu ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Sarvastaratu durgani sarvo bhadrani pashyatu. Sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good. And may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravir Maheti Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Let's start with the verses 6 and 7 today. It's on page 358. Ye tu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matparaha ananye naiva yogena Mam dhyayanta upasate Teshamaham samudharta Mrityu samsara sagarat Bhavami nachirat partha Maya veshita chetasam. Those, however, who renouncing all actions in me and being attached to me, worship me with unswerving devotion through meditation, these people who have fixed their mind on me, I quickly redeem from this ocean of transmigratory existence beset with death. In the earlier verses which we saw last week, we saw Krishna referring to how people understand and worship God. That there are, we saw last time, at least 3 ways of doing it, broadly speaking. That some amongst us view God in a very personal way. God with who can be visualized with some form, identified by some name, and to whom we can relate with the different qualities that God has. A second way of looking upon God is not thinking of God in a specific form, and yet God is a person filled with great qualities. And a third way of looking upon God is in a completely impersonal way. No form, no qualities, nothing. So it's interesting that when we begin to think about it philosophically, we are able to separate it out in these ways. Because when we don't think about it philosophically, all of these things get merged. People think about God with a form, with some qualities, and at the same time we like to think God is omnipresent. God is everywhere. Well, if God is everywhere, then God cannot be somewhere. So, but most of us, most of the time, are not thinking philosophically, which is okay. We don't have to be always great philosophers. But it's good to remember that when we try to think about it logically, then the moment we ascribe a form quality to God, we are already limited the infinitude of God. Even if it is not limited in a literal sense, at least for the sake of our prayer and meditation, we have the immensity of God is so beyond the capacity of our mind to grasp that for the sake of our convenience, we make God a little bit more graspable. As you can see, we do that with a lot of other things in life. The science that we study, say, in college or in high school, is not essentially different from the science that we study when we are very young. And at the same time, what we are taught when we are young is some of the very basic principles of science without going into too many of the subtle nuances, which is not fully accurate, but it's enough for that stage. And when we grow, then we begin to ask more questions, and then some of these subtle nuances become clear. As many of us might have seen that when we are very young, we are taught light travels in a straight line. A light is this, or light is that. And then, of course, when we grow older, and then we see, well, somebody can go it can go as waves, and it's not exactly a straight line, and so on. So it's just kind of one example to show how sometimes we make some approximations, not with the idea to deceive someone, but recognizing that at that age, if someone is just 4 or 5 or 6 years old, to teach quantum physics at that age, probably not a good idea. And yet, we want them to have some basics. So we make things simpler. And in an effort to make things simpler, we might sometimes distort them a little bit. So long as those distortions, we outgrow the need for them and then understand the truth as we grow, I think it's fine. So sometimes looking upon God with some qualities or ascribing some form to the infinite divine being is an approximation, you could say is a kind of distortion. Because if the infinite being is beyond the capacity of our limited mind and senses, we are never going to be able to understand God. And yet the mind craves for that understanding. So what we do is we try to do the best we can with the available limited mind and senses that we have. And with the limited mind and senses that we have, the best that we can come up with is at least these 3 broad categories of understanding God. God with form, with qualities, no form, but with qualities, and no form, no qualities. And about that last one, no form, no qualities, the impersonal God, as we saw in the earlier verses, Krishna says it's even those people will reach the same truth as others do, but that path is a little bit more challenging. And as we saw again, that because form and qualities are so real to us in our day-to-day life, it is easier for us to think of the divine also in terms of names and forms. When we are able to go beyond our own form and all the infinite forms that we encounter in daily life, it will be easier then to think of God as beyond form. So let's read this verse in the background of what I have just said. Those, however, who renouncing all actions in me, that is the personal being, and being attached to me, worship me with unswerving devotion through meditation, these people who have fixed their mind on me, I quickly redeem from this ocean of transmigratory existence beset with death. So this is now he's referring to those who see God as a person. And how do they approach such a God? Renouncing all actions in me, that whatever work they do, they don't see it as my work. Everything is offered to God. All the work that you do is an offering to God. And being attached to me, these people, in the hundreds of different small and big attachments that we have in life, if the major part of our attachment is to the divine being, worship me with unswerving devotion. That the word unswerving is very important here. That is, we as devotees of God, we love God, we are attached to God, we like to do everything for God. But yet, none of this has become unswerving yet. In other words, the capacity to love that we have is right now fractured. Our loves go to many different entities in this world, whether it's material objects or living beings or animals. It could be just, it's going in many different directions. Now, those of us who take religion seriously, a lot of our love may go toward the spiritual ideal, may go toward God, but it hasn't become dominant yet. So when a stage is reached that all my love goes towards God, now that raises a question. If all my love goes towards God, do I stop loving other people? No. That's a one-word answer to that question. Now, I think that needs some explanation. If all of my love goes to God, then there'll be no love left to direct to anybody else. And the idea is this, that love is such an entity which cannot really end in the sense we use the word end. That we will continue to love everyone, but not directly. It's like most of our wireless conversation nowadays. None of us, when I call someone over my phone is not really directly in touch with that other phone. Most of it goes through cell towers or sometimes through the satellite. So we might think that when you call someone, you are speaking directly with that person, but it's never really direct. Even when you send an email, it's never really directly going from your computer to the computer of the person you send it. It goes through several servers on the way. So if we love God, and God is this great giant satellite, if you want to think about God that way, and all of our love can be sent to God, and then it gets reflected from God onto this whole creation. And it's your love that has gone there and then is being reflected. So you are loving all, but you're not making a direct connection. It is going through God. When that happens, then that would be unswerving devotion. All the work that you do, again, you can say, well, I'm doing work for God. That means, should I stop doing work for the world? No. We'll continue to do what we are doing. But instead of thinking that I'm doing it for this person or that person, in your mind, you say, I'm doing it out of love for God. You don't have to tell this to anyone. Your boss can still think that you're working for him or her. You don't have to go and tell your boss, I'm working for God, not for you. No need to do that. But in your heart, if you see yourself as a devotee of God, and if you want to be redeemed from the ocean of transmigratory existence, then all of my love should go to God, and through God to each and everything in this world. All of the work that I do, again, should be done out of love for God, And of course, God is not just going to take away your work and disappear somewhere. The work you'll be doing, it'll be here itself. So the work that you do will benefit your family, your friends, the world in general. But in your heart, you are doing that work out of love for God. Now that is what is meant by worship me with unswerving devotion through meditation. These people who have fixed their mind on me, again, if this is important, if I fix my mind on one thing, my mind will be taken away from something else. But if I fix my mind on God, since God is the source of everything, since God encompasses everything, if my mind is fixed on God, it is automatically fixed on everything. We might sometimes think that if I think of God, I will not be able to remain in touch with this world. Wrong thinking. It's impossible for us to be in touch with the world fully. After all, direct connections are always very less. But if I'm able to establish that contact with God, through God, I can be in touch with the entire creation at once. It's interesting when we say, this is one interesting story you might like. Among the disciples of Ramakrishna, Swami Premananda was one of the great disciples of Ramakrishna, and he was a very loving, affectionate personality. So loving that we read in his life that the devotees, and especially a lot of youngsters, some college-going students who used to come to meet him, they used to be so overwhelmed by his love and affection for them. Sometimes they shed tears and said, "Swami, you love us so much." And then Swami Premananda would tell them, he said, "You are fools." he said, "I'm not able to love you even 1/100th part, even 1% of how much Ramakrishna used to love us." And you can see, same thing you can see in the lives of all these great ones, the life of Buddha, life of Jesus, life of all of these great ones, that how much love they had. Now, how is it that we are able to feel the love of these great ones even today? Not just the contemporaries who are with them. There are people even today living amongst us who will shed tears thinking about how much Ramakrishna loves them, how much Holy Mother loves them. How come we are able to feel their love even today? They are not even here physically amongst us. And the reason is because they all loved God. They loved God with all their heart, with all their soul. And that love is getting now reflected, cutting across the limitations imposed by space and time. We're able to feel their love even today. And so that is the idea. If, with unswerving devotion through meditation, these people who have fixed their mind on me, I quickly redeem from this ocean of transmigratory existence beset with death. By death is meant impermanence. The world in which we live is constantly changing. The Sanskrit word samsara really means that which is constantly changing, that which is constantly moving. We need something which is unchanging, something which is constant in this world. And that constant thing is the spiritual ideal, is God. Anything other than that, change is death. That is why sometimes we might think that death is an event, that death is something that is an event that occurs. But actually, death is not an event. Death is simply what we recognize as death is only the completion of a process. And that process begins the moment we are born. And we know constantly, our body is constantly changing. And at the molecular level, it's constantly changing. Something which we can't see with the naked eye. But even what we can see with the naked eye is clearly, we can see even physically how much we have changed from the time we were little babies to what we are now. Mentally, we are changing. Our thoughts and ideas, hopes change with age, change with circumstances. So there is a lot of change occurring outside of us, a lot of change occurring inside of us. Now, if we don't have something to hold on to in the midst of this change, we are doomed. It's like if there is a hurricane on a twister with 100, 150 miles per hour winds, what are you going to do? If you have something to hold on to, why do people seek a shelter during such time? Because shelter is something which will not get carried away by these winds. I can be protected in a storm if I have something which is stable. Now, the world in which we live, at the level of ideas, at the level of the matter, just the material things, is constantly changing. And those who have nothing unchanging to hold on to, they are completely helpless. It's like the leaf, like in now this, well, the fall is almost coming to an end, but you can still see nowadays leaves falling. And that leaf has nothing to hold on to. As long as it was holding on to the tree and strong, it was okay. Rain, wind, storm, nothing happened. Once it let go, and it's now just at the mercy of the wind. Now, we don't want our own lives to become like that. We must have something strong to hold on to. And that change is called by the name death here. So it is such people whom God redeems from the ocean of transmigratory existence, that is death. So any change is death, changelessness is life. And so, beginning with verse number 8, now Krishna will teach us, those of us who want to follow the path of love, path of devotion to God, what are the things we need to do in life? It's a very, very practical chapter. You can see now as we read verse number 8. Mayeva mana adhatsva Mayi buddhim niveshaya Nivaseshyasi mayi eva Ata urdhvam na samshayaha. Fix your mind on me alone. Let your intellect rest in me. You will live in me alone hereafter. There is no doubt. Fix your mind on me alone. Here, me, as I said, every time Krishna uses the first person pronoun me, it does not refer to Krishna as a person. It refers to what Krishna understood when he said I or me. And what Krishna understood, what makes Krishna Krishna, is that when Krishna said me, he didn't refer to his body and mind. Well, when you and I say me or I, we refer to this. If Krishna also referred to his body and mind, then there is no difference between Krishna and us. But he was different. That is why we worship him. That is why we read his book. That is why we are benefiting from his teachings. So when Krishna said I or me, he meant that unchanging, the divine within. And this is true not just with Krishna, it's true with all of these great ones. When Jesus said, I'm the truth, I'm the way, I'm life, this I is again not this body and mind of Jesus. It's the spirit, the divine within. Same is true with what Buddha said. All of these great ones, when they said I, they did not refer to these changing parts of their personality. They referred to the unchanging truth within them. And so, when Krishna says, fix your mind on me alone, I mean, fix your mind on that unchanging truth, that unchanging being, which we mostly use the word God for that unchanging spiritual ideal, that source of all life, the source of all love. We know from our own lives how challenging it is to fix our mind on anything. But generally, we see that it is easier to fix our mind on things that we love, things that we like. Very difficult to fix our mind on something that we hate. Actually, in some sense, it's actually possible to, well, let me put it this way, and this might sound a bit heretical. I think it's difficult to put our mind on something or fix our mind on something which we don't think is important enough. But if there is something we love intensely, or if it's something we hate intensely, either way, the mind remains fixed on it. It's like if you are, say, and I mean, sometimes even people who are paranoid, say, by fear of something, say, fear of snakes, let's say, their mind is fixed on snakes. They don't want to think about it. I mean, if they're not thinking of snakes, they are not afraid. But that paranoia makes them think of the things they don't want to think about. So, extreme fear, extreme hatred, and extreme love will keep our mind fixed on whatever it loves or hates. Our problem, for those of us who see ourselves as religious, is that we have not developed either of them toward God, either extreme hatred or extreme love. Now, of course, we might say, well, extreme hatred, why would we want to hate God? And that's true, not a good idea. But I just mention it just to show that the mind can get attached to anything if there is a strong intensity of feeling toward it. That feeling could be positive or negative. In fact, in Krishna's life itself, we read that he slayed many, many demons, as you read in his life. And his uncle, actually, he was related. Krishna was his nephew. His uncle had gotten this message, the divine message, so to speak, that he will die at the hands of his nephew, who was Krishna. Now, if that uncle hadn't heard this divine proclamation, he probably would have loved his nephew. Well, most uncles don't go about killing their nephew, so he would have loved him. But here in Krishna's story, we see there's this uncle named Kamsa. He was his mother's brother and was a very tyrant, very evil man. And he heard this divine voice telling him that you will die, and you will die from this child, Krishna. Now, while all love for anything will disappear quickly, if you know that entity is the possible cause of your death. And so this uncle of his did everything in his power to just finish off this little boy. And he just hated him. He was afraid of him. He hated him. So hatred, fear, everything was combined. And he made several attempts to kill him. And of course, obviously, he didn't succeed. But interestingly, when finally the time came and Krishna killed him, we read in the books that this uncle immediately became liberated. Doesn't make sense. Shouldn't make sense. But that example is given sometimes to show that out of this extreme fear and hatred of Krishna, this uncle's mind was always on Krishna. Because he just, even in his sleep, out of fear, he just was seeing Krishna, this Krishna has come to kill me. So all the time he was thinking of Krishna, not out of love, but Krishna being the embodiment of purity, embodiment of love, embodiment of all of these things. Just by this constant being attached to Krishna through hatred and fear, his mind became purified and he became liberated. This is not to recommend that we practice this as in our lives, but to emphasize that such is the purity of God, that being in touch with God, even out of hatred, that purity will rub off on us. That being in touch with God, no matter which way, we will still be benefited. As sometimes it is said, if you go in, when it's raining outside, you go there willingly or non-willingly, whether you love the rain or hate the rain. If you are in rain and if you have no raincoat or an umbrella, you are going to get wet. You can't say, rain will say, oh, this person hates me. I'm not going to wet this person. Or this person loves me, only this. So if you are in water, you're going to get wet. Doesn't matter whether you love it or hate it. Exactly in the same way, if you are in touch with God, if your mind is fixed on God, doesn't matter whether you love God or hate God, you're going to be liberated. Again, as I said, this is only, it's a figure of speech, often used as a hyperbole to show that even if the mind is in contact with God through hatred, you can be liberated. But that's what is the point here, that with their mind fixed on me, let your intellect rest in me. Now, what does it mean for the intellect resting on God? Now, intellect is our capacity to think, capacity to make decisions, to weigh the pros and cons. How much of our intellect, how often the various ideas and thoughts that we have in the course of a day, how often is this capacity of the mind to think, to contemplate, is used in relation to God? Those of us who practice prayer and meditation, how many minutes a day do we pray or meditate? Considering that there are 24 hours in a day, if you sleep for 8 hours, 1/3 of your day is gone in sleep. Then work, if you work 8 or 10 hours, that's another 1/3 of your day is gone. And so if you just keep on, and then your time that you have your dinner, your lunch, and so on. So if you go on finding out how the 24 hours in a day, how is your budgeting, time budgeting is done, we might discover that if at all we devote some time for prayer or meditation, it's a very negligible time. It's a very small amount. What is few minutes in the morning? Even if it's an hour or a two, still compared to the 24 hours, it's still a very small amount. So what if we start walking and you take 3 steps ahead and 5 steps behind, and 3 steps ahead and 5 steps behind? We are never going to make any progress because we are going back more than we are going in front. So if I spend now, say, an hour thinking of God and 23 hours thinking of everything else, how can I expect that 1 hour of thinking of God will neutralize, if not change, my 23 hours of thinking something else? So there are 2 things. First of all, the quality of those few minutes that I pray and meditate must be such that the benefit of that thinking should not remain limited only to those few minutes of prayer or meditation. That benefit should somehow last longer. It's like when you take a shot, when you take a flu shot, let's say. When you take a flu shot, and well, usually you'll take in one spot. But that doesn't mean only this spot is free from flu. It's like, well, your rest of the body, you haven't taken a shot in there. And what if you understand what I'm saying, that even if you take shot in one place, the entire body gets the benefit of that shot. So if we can try to look upon our practice of prayer or meditation, you can see the body of a day. If the body of a day is a 24-hour body, and we are giving it a shot of a few minutes in one place. But that shot should be given in such a way, in our right place. Once I had been for my blood work to be done, and they would find it difficult to find my vein, and so they kind of put it once, they had to take it out, and it was extremely painful. And so if we don't put the needle in the right place, not only is there no benefit, actually there is pain. So similarly, when we put this, our meditation shot, in a 24-hour body of the day, it must be done in a proper way, if that benefit has to last at least for that day. And that's why oftentimes spiritual teachers advise that immediately after prayer or meditation, don't immediately start doing something so as to wipe off the whatever little bit of calmness and harmony that might have been restored within you in those few minutes will simply get shaken out of it. So try to adjust your schedule in such a way that you'll have a few minutes before you sit for prayer just to calm yourself, and then you do your prayer, your japa, your meditation, and after meditation again, gradually glide into your activities. Maybe do a little bit of reading, even if it's for 5 minutes, and kind of slow that so that the peace and calm and the energy that you have kind of accumulated during that time of prayer, because prayer, meditation, worship are extremely energizing when done in a proper way. They not only restore the harmony within us, they not only make the mind calm, they actually bring a lot of energy. Oftentimes, when you meditate really well with complete attention, exactly in the same way, putting the mind on God, keeping the intellect resting on God, if we are able to do it, you will see, even physically, at the end of a meditation, you will feel rejuvenated. You will feel lighter. And the world will seem brighter. So that's what meditation and prayer can do. Now, once you and it's a great feeling, but we need to find a way to preserve that feeling, at least for some time. Otherwise, we cannot just see the mind that we use for meditation is the same mind that we use for other work. It's not a different mind. So you cannot be doing something so, you cannot be like yelling and shouting and spewing hatred and then say, now it's time for my meditation. Now I just go and sit. You're never going to be able to meditate that way. So you need to have some kind of a preparation before that. And immediately after that also, try to remain a little bit calm, maybe do a little reading, kind of gradually move into your whatever duties and responsibilities you have. That way, you will be able to preserve the benefit of meditation for a longer time. And Krishna says, those who fix their mind on me alone, let your intellect rest in me. When we are able to do that, then you will live in me alone hereafter. But hereafter means even after death. There is no doubt about it. So have no doubt about it. So all of our thinking, all of our work, all of our love, all of the attachment that we have, all of these can be directed towards everyone through God. So long as God becomes the hub of all our activities, of all our thinking, we are safe. The moment you kind of try to bypass that hub and try to make direct connections, we are in trouble. So it's a little bit like think about it this way. If your computer were to be directly connected with other computers, whose identity you don't even know, then there is a great chance of all these viruses that are coming. There is nothing to protect you. But a lot of times, all of these things are connected through some big powerful servers, and those servers have much better protective mechanism than your little computer does. But even in a little computer, oftentimes nowadays, because security has become such a major issue, so you have these firewalls and everything. So if you have that, then you're protected. So directing all of our work, thinking, love towards the world through the firewall of God, we are protected. No viruses will enter within, and we will be incapable of sending viruses outside also. So that's the message that comes to us from these 3 verses that we saw today, 6, 7, and 8. Do you have any thoughts, comments, questions about what we have studied today? Yep.
The definition of work is a very broad definition, right? It's not just work, it's all actions, right?
All activities work.
So Swamiji, you said that it's easier to fix the mind on God when we love God. So how can you love God unless you can fix your mind on God? So how can you know God?
Yeah, good question. That is where thinking helps. Normally, when we find that we will benefit from something, it's easier to love something which is somehow beneficial to us, will help us. Avocado, for instance. So it was just like, it's just like many other things. But then when I was told this avocado is very good for your health, and then these are the health benefits of avocado, and then I began to love avocado. Before that, there wasn't any special love for avocado. Similarly, if there is a potassium cyanide, it's poison, there is no reason for me to love it, because I think, whoa, that's poison. Even if I accidentally, if it goes in, it's going to be the end. So just the way we are constituted, that which is beneficial, it becomes easier to love. That which is harmful to us, we want to keep away. And therefore, thinking helps, because then we can ask, if that love for God doesn't come naturally in our hearts, then, if it comes naturally, then there is no problem at all. But if it doesn't come naturally, then we can just do what any sane human being would do. Say, love God. Why should I love God? And then you have, if you love God, then you will be redeemed from the ocean of transmigratory existence. And then pretty much what we saw this morning, that, not this morning, just a few minutes ago, that in the midst of all this change, there is this unchanging reality, which we call God. And if I hold on to this stable, unmoving source of everything, I will not be blown away. And so I then stand to gain a lot by holding on to God. So in the beginning, our attachment to God may be a little selfish, you could say. It may be like, I don't have any special love for God, but if I hold on to God, I will gain a lot. So there is still selfishness, there is still self-interest involved. I think that's fine. But at least it is giving me a handle, giving me a reason of why I can hold on to God. And the beauty is this, just as we saw in the case of Krishna's uncle, if I hold on to God even for selfish reasons, such is the purity and power of that divine being that after some time, my selfishness will melt away. So oftentimes we might begin our spiritual quest with a self-interest, but gradually that self gets refined, that self gets purified, and then the whole scene changes. Yes. Does that answer your question?
Swamiji, often I think even in this verse it is told that loving personal God is easier compared to impersonal God. So, and in many verses it said that you start loving or praying for a personal God, then later you might enter, or you'll be able to realize the God impersonal. So it always gives us a concept that, okay, when I'm starting, I'm loving the God, so it is very, it is a kind of like, it's a lower level of praying, and I think our mind is programmed to think that way. That we are still not graduated. We are doing this thing. That's way.
Yep. Yes, that's true. The reason why sometimes the personal might seem as if it is lower than the impersonal, because by our way of thinking, it seems a little illogical. As I said, because in the same breath we say, God is infinite, God is everywhere, and then we say, well, but God is here. And so the logic that we use, this doesn't seem to be logical. And that is why it seems as if, oh, in the beginning, let my idea of God be limited, and then gradually I will graduate into that higher ideal. It's not strictly true, but I don't think it's particularly harmful to think that way. Why it's not true is that even referring to God as impersonal is not correct. Because referring to God as anything is not correct. The moment you are able to use a word to describe God, already the transcendence of God is already affected the moment you label it. So while someone might think, well, impersonal is higher than personal, it's okay if that person thinks about it, no need to have a good fight over it. But it's good to know that seeing God as a personal being is as much a limitation of my mind as seeing God as impersonal is also a limitation of the mind. When I'm able to transcend the limitation of my mind, I will see God as neither personal nor impersonal. I will see God as one who transcends even the idea of a person and the idea of a non-person. It transcends all ideas. That time you will not be able to label God as impersonal. And so in that sense, personal and impersonal are on the same level. Some people might be able to connect naturally this way. A few people might be able to do it this way. The reason this is said is the personal is said to be easier because every one of us is a person. Because we are a person, it is easier for us to establish personal relationships, personal connections. And because we are accustomed to these personal relationships, we are just now using our present knowledge and experience to direct it to God. So I have these relationships in the world. Can I now develop a relationship with God? So it is not going from it's going from the known to, we're using our known experience to something else. Rather than, that's why it's difficult, that Krishna says in verse number 4, is the reason it's difficult is, there is nobody to relate to. Because who are you going to relate to? If God is infinite, there is nobody to turn to for help. But in our daily life, we find we are so dependent. None of us is independent. No matter how much we might think, oh, I'm independent, we are not. We depend on so much. When we were, and as I've often said, when we are little babies, we depended on our parents or whoever raised us. As we grew up then, we depended on our teachers, our friends. We have received so much from the world. We depend on this Mother Earth. We depend on nature. So dependence is kind of inbuilt into our present structure. And therefore, it is easier for us then to depend on somebody. But for the impersonal, there is nobody to depend on. That's why it becomes difficult. And that's why, in general, it is said it is easier to have a personal, because relationships, dependence is something that it's already a part of our life at present. Okay?
Swamiji, when we are talking about that personal God and build a relationship, because relationship based on all emotional. So if we can build, we can break too, because it's emotional is involved. And like you said, that we always love something when we have something benefit. So how could we go above that? Because God is not something that we are looking, even though we look for some kind of guidance or benefit. So how could we go above that? Because it can break, if it can build, it can break too.
Sure, it can, of course. So it's true. So as long as our emotions are not refined, not purified, there'll be always these fluctuations. And our relationship with God there is emotions involved, no doubt about it. But our emotions aren't become refined yet. And that is why some days we feel an overwhelming love for God, some days we feel nothing, we just feel dry. So these emotions kind of have this roller coaster pattern in our lives. Now, as our emotions become purified, as our emotions get refined, these ups and downs will become less. Then there'll be kind of a steady love will remain. And in fact, all of the yogas are first and foremost methods of purification. So the path of devotion, Bhakti Yoga, is purification of our emotions and feelings. The path of knowledge, Jnana Yoga, is purification of our faculty of reason. Even reasoning needs to be purified. So reason by itself is not pure. Because what can be proved through reason can be disproved through reason. Ask any lawyer. So, the logic or reason can be, it just depends, it can go any which way. And therefore, even the reason needs to be purified. And that's what path of knowledge will do. Similarly, our willpower needs to be purified. So path of Karma Yoga and path of Raja Yoga, both of them will purify our willpower. So all of these yogas really purify the different functions of the mind. Emotions and feelings, willpower, and capacity to reason. Okay, so we will stop here today. We begin next time on verse number 9. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhuhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. So on Sunday, our subject will be understanding Kali. About 6 days from now, that is next Tuesday night, we will have Kali Puja. So in preparation for that, on Sunday, the satsang will be on understanding Kali. On Saturday, we will not have the meditation, But on next Tuesday, of course, is the Kali Puja. So we will now have prayer on page 3 of your books. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.